This is 91.3 FM, WCW in Worcester, Massachusetts, the Dr. Chris Radio of Horror program. And tonight on Radio of Horror, we have the writer of the current in-stores Howling Comic Book series, miniseries on the show with us, Mickey Nielsen. Thank you for coming on the show with us, Mickey.
It is a pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
Howling Revenge of the Werewolf Queen is a direct sequel to the original Howling movie, ignoring parts 2 through 10. Which is ridiculous that they've made 9 sequels. Why did you decide to make a sequel directly to the original movie? Is it because that movie had that kind of like weird ending that she's just like at the bar eating a burger and still alive?
Yeah, well, I mean, going back, so I saw the movie when I was 17 years old. And so, you know, when you're a kid, when you're a teenager, the movies you watch, some of those movies leave a lasting impression. And The Howling was my first real taste of werewolves. And werewolves, you know, have remained my favorite subgenre of horror since then. And it's all due to The Howling. So it was something that was a passion project for sure. It's something that, you know, I jumped at the chance. I had met Sean Barry, who runs Space Goat, and he was telling me about these licenses that he could potentially have access to, and he brought up The Howling, and I just about fell out of my chair. And I kept bugging the hell out of him. I was like, you got to get The Howling. You got to get The Howling. I'm like, you know, come on, I would kill to write this comic. And he finally did it, and he sent me the message and said, all right, you know, I'm pulling the trigger. I've got The Howling. And I was just like, oh, thank you. Hallelujah. This is going to be the coolest thing ever. And yeah, we did ignore those other ones, I think, and I don't remember
There's only 8
offhand
films, actually, not
which
10.
one. What's that?
They said there's only 8 films, by the way, in the franchise
Oh, okay.
using quotations, not 10. So I overstepped only because there's just a ridiculous number of sequels to this.
Yeah, and I didn't watch all of them.
Don't ever.
So yeah, I watched part 2, and I mean, even the boobs didn't save that movie, which is tough because that, you know, boobs go a long way for me in a horror film. Even the boob loop at the end couldn't save that film. It was just really, really, really bad. And, you know, I think I watched maybe 1 or 2 more after that. But and there was one, I don't remember which one it was, but there was one that tried to show what happened after the end of Howling 1, but it was all wrong. Like Chris Halloran had like a machine gun or something. It was just, you know, and the werewolf wasn't even close to being the actual, you know, Karen White werewolf. So it's just, you know, really, really weird. So yeah, we did ignore those, and we wanted to pick up the story and tell it from the end of the original film.
What about going back and maybe adapting the original novels into comic books?
Yeah, so, you know, I talked to, one of the first things I said to Sean was, I said, well, I'll go through and I'll read all the novels. You know, I've read the first one. I've
the
got
Howling
the other
trilogy,
2.
basically, because there's only 3 novels, so it is a Howling trilogy of novels.
Yeah, exactly. And I said, you know, I'll read the other books, and I can put that mythology into the comic. And he said, well, the license is for the movie specifically. So the license that he has, the rights that he has, is only for the movie. It doesn't cover the books. And that's why I didn't go through. I'm still going to read the other 2, but I didn't take that material and include that material into the comic book because we don't have the license for that.
Who owns the licensing to the Howling?
That I'm not sure.
Is it MGM?
I don't know. What's that?
I mean, is it MGM or Anchor Bay seems to have distributed the last one, but they distributed the movie. Does that mean they own the licensing to the movie?
Oh, for the movie rights, yeah, it's a website, and I can't remember the name offhand, but they own a bunch of movie licenses. So, they've got like Highlander, they've got Rambo, they've got all these movie licenses, and sometimes when you're talking about a franchise,
Oh, you're talking about Artisan because Artisan owned all these franchises, but they got bought out by Lionsgate.
okay, yeah, I don't know who it is offhand. I just know that there's a website where you go and you can pay a certain amount of money and you have access to some of these licenses. But some of them, even in a franchise, say you've got a franchise with multiple films like Highlander or something, they might only have rights to one of the films. They might only have the rights to Highlander 1 or Highlander 4 or something like that. So that's the deal with the movie rights. As far as the book rights, I'm not sure who owns the book rights currently.
But it's like it's like Joe Dante, unlike Sam Raimi. Sam Raimi owns the character Ash, and he owns the name
Mm-hmm.
Evil Dead. Joe Dante did not license to him the name The Howling, which would basically include all characters within.
Right.
Like Sam Raimi, put a cease and desist lawsuit against some fans that were trying to make Evil Dead 4 and actually calling it Evil Dead Part 4 years ago, and he put a cease and desist against them because he's like, I own that, guys. That's never gonna happen. And he was planning the remake, and then of course now we have Ash versus the Evil Dead TV series. So he owns the
Yep.
character. I mean, he does not own the movies, but he owns the character and the name Evil Dead. So that means he owns all characters and merchandising and all the stuff within.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Kind of like George Lucas owned Star Wars for a number of years, but
Right.
it was
Yeah, I
distributed
was
by
thinking
20th
that.
Century Fox.
Yep, I was thinking that when you said that. Yep.
So, um, so that's why I've always been curious. Is like, well, who the hell owns the Howling and all the
Yeah.
sequels? Because I'm assuming all the sequels come with it.
So I think, and I could be wrong about this, Sean would know for sure. I think it's one of those where they own the rights to the first
Film.
film.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
pretty sure it's just the first
So
one.
we're not going to be getting like maybe a prequel to Howling 2 with like Christopher Lee likenesses, or maybe Sybil Shepherd with her amazing breasts. Um,
Yep.
it's funny that we talk about Sybil Shepherd because she was in Playboy years ago, and we just lost Hugh Hefner.
Oh, right. Yeah, I know. I just saw that that he passed. What was that, yesterday?
No, earlier this week.
Ah, man. Yeah. Yeah, that's a shame. But yeah, Sybil Shepherd, I don't remember who it was. Whoever did the boob loop at the end of the Howling, I think it was some model or something like that. And it's just one of those, like, you just kind of scratch your head and go, well, on
It,
one hand I kind of get it, but on the other hand I really don't know what they were doing. And then the other movies, like, I heard about the marsupial one and stuff like
ugh,
that. So I
yeah,
don't know.
she gives birth to like a kangaroo werewolf thing out of her pouch. Oh God. Yeah, I mean, he's like in bed with her and like lowering his hand down, getting into her downtown business, and then puts it into her pouch, and it's all gooey, gross. You're only doing a 4-issue miniseries. Why just 4 issues? And do you plan on doing another series, or once this is it, it's done, no more?
I think that's really going to depend on the response. So we've
And
gotten a really good critical response, a lot of coverage from a lot of different horror websites and things like that,
but
and the fans.
the first issue coming out in July, you should have the diamond sales back by now, right?
So Sean has been out and about. So I haven't talked to him about what the latest sales figures are. When he gets back into town, I'm sure we'll have that discussion, and we need to look at all 4 issues. So, in obviously comparing 1 to 2, and how much of a drop off was there from the first one to the second one, and are people still engaged by the time number 4 comes around, and then how are the sales going to be on the bind up?
Oh yeah, the
So
trade
so
paperback.
looking at all that, and then I would love to do another one, and I have ideas as to what a second arc for the Howling would be, and so it really depends on the response. Like I said, critically, it's been great. The horror community is awesome. I love the horror community, and I'm on Facebook. I'm a member of all these different horror groups and everything else, and it's a total blast. So it's been a good response there. Hopefully, the sales will result in a scenario that makes sense to do more of these.
Well, if you do end up getting a green light to do more of these, and you want to do another miniseries, I actually have an idea for a Howling one shot or maybe a short story called Eddie's Story.
Ooh, yeah, yeah, yeah. The Mangler. Yeah,
Yes.
kind of going back into his backstory a little bit, like when he was running around L.A. just killing people.
So my idea is that um, the hologram from Voyager is left on Earth. No, I'm kidding. For anyone who doesn't know, the actor who plays Eddie the werewolf that Karen meets at the beginning of The Howling in the porno theater, by the way, of all places to meet a reporter, especially a female reporter, would go on to play Robert Picardo, would go on to play the Doctor, in no name, just the Doctor, the hologram on Star Trek Voyager for 7 seasons, and a
Yep.
cameo in Star Trek First Contact.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
But no, I seriously actually have a small idea for like an Eddie kind of story, like a prequel leading up to, him meeting Karen in the porno theater.
Oh, that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. I don't think I have enough energy to do 64 pages like a one shot or something, but maybe a short story, like Tales of the Howling, you could do. You know what I mean?
Oh, I'd love it because when I first saw the movie, I mean, you feel like you're coming into the end of one story already, because obviously there's been this huge media push behind the
Eddie the serial
Mangler.
killer, yeah, because he's a serial killer.
Yeah, and they're at the tail end of that. So how long has he been out there killing people? How many people has he killed, and what's the story behind all that? Which, I think is fascinating. So that one was always something that kind of stuck in the back of my mind as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I even think that like if they wanted to make um like a short story like film with the Howling, I mean Ricardo and like Wallace are still alive, and makeup and CGI can easily make them look a bit younger, like they did in the Howling movie.
Yeah. Well, my dream is that, enough people read the Howling comic and the right people read the Howling comic and they say, you know what? We should do another movie, but do it right this time.
Yeah, let's
Like,
not
do
make a Howling Reborn or Howling the Marsupials or Howling the Beginning or whatever it was.
well, werewolves in general, there aren't enough really, really good werewolf movies out there. And it's amazing to me, The Howling and American Werewolf in London came out in the same year.
Yes.
And, and so you would think, back in '81, you've got these two groundbreaking films and showcasing some of the most amazing practical effects and makeup effects and transformations. You would think that would be a springboard, and just from there, that now we would have this legacy of incredible werewolf films. What happened to werewolves? I have no idea. Like, after those two movies, we had some that came along that were pretty good. You've got your Ginger Snaps, and you've got your Dog Soldiers, and you've got your Silver Bullet, and
Monster
Late
Squad
Phases and things like that.
and the Monster
But
Squad.
it's Monster Squad. Yeah,
Oh my
and
god, you should make the comic book of the Monster Squad, because there is no Monster Squad comic book. And I mean, Space Goat, not Ghost,
yeah.
Goat, is basically becoming like this studio putting out these horror books. Yes, they have original content too, and I'm going to admit that I have not read any of it. In fact, I've never heard of Space Goat until I saw the Ash versus Evil Dead 2 or Evil Dead 2 comic book series come out, and then of course the board games for the Terminator and the Evil Dead And then the Howling is the one that really caught my eye and started making me. That was the first purchase I had from Space Goat. But I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing because look at IDW and how successful they've been with Transformers, GI Joe, My Little Pony, Gem. I mean, the entire Hasbro line of comic books, as well as the X-Files, Godzilla, Star Trek.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I know it's not IDW, it's Titan, but I've been reading Robotech too, which is fantastic. I mean,
and Titan has been putting out like Castle Wolfenstein comic book, and they just started Captain Kronos, a vampire hunter, based on the the standalone film by Hammer, which was supposed to start its own franchise. Which, if you watch that movie, you can get really into it and go, "Wow, that should have been a franchise." That movie was really good. That was a really good swashbuckling sword and vampire movie. But unfortunately, it was like one of the last films Hammer produced before they folded.
Oh yeah, Hammer did some great stuff, and between Universal and Hammer in that kind of classic era. I just went to Best Buy today and saw the Alex Ross cover art for the Universal Blu-rays.
Oh, the monsters.
Oh man, so beautiful. The artwork he did for that is absolutely gorgeous.
I bought Dracula and Frankenstein.
Oh, nice. Yeah, they're all on my Christmas list. I want to get all of those.
Yeah, me too.
But yeah, werewolf movies. I don't know, and Underworld, I think did a good job, and
they're
I've
barely werewolves in that.
Yeah, I've done a few of these where I talk about the effects and that kind of a thing, and so they did the follow up to American Werewolf in London, American Werewolf in Paris, and when you go too CG heavy on the werewolves, it really starts to look funky. It doesn't look right to me, and so I love when they do a mixture of the practical effects and the CG, and kind of like they did with Jurassic Park. But if you do that with werewolves, it looks pretty good. The effects that they did for the Underworld werewolves were pretty cool. So I'd love to see more of those. And I'm on a one-man campaign at this point to try and bring werewolves back and make them as popular as vampires and zombies. So we'll see how that goes.
You could technically do that, like I said, going back to the Monster Squad, because none of those monsters in the Monster Squad have any type of backstory or origin. They just show up in the movie.
Yeah.
So, my thought was, like, if you want to stay with werewolves, like, the Monster Squad does have their own Wolfman.
Yeah.
How did he become a Wolfman? Why is he so, like, desperate to get himself killed or whatever at the police station? Played by Johnny Rico from Napoleon Dynamite.
Is there a line about nards in there?
Yeah,
something?
He gets kicked in the nards by the fat kid.
That's great.
Again, there's just a lot of different things you can do with it too. But with going back to the Howling, there's several different avenues that you can take with this, with all like the different characters. If you just have access to the first movie, like how did the community get set up and stuff?
Oh yeah, exactly.
Where did the werewolf queen come from? Was she born a werewolf?
Yeah, and that's kind of a general werewolf lore question that you have to, it's one of those things you have to get into. So is it possible for two werewolves to come together and reproduce, and then you get a full-blooded werewolf that's born a werewolf? And so those are the fun kind of questions. There's always rules to all these subgenres. Like the vampires have their rules with the sunlight and the crosses and the garlic and all that, and you have to, you do a vampire story and you just pick and choose. Like, okay, I'm gonna take these rules and we're gonna toss out these other rules, and then there's always going to be some point in the story where they explain. And they tell you so that the reader or the audience knows, where we're at. So they did that in The Howling. He says these guys can change anytime they want.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool. Instead of waiting until the moon comes out, they can transform into cartoon werewolves like they do when they're making love.
Yeah, it's when you go back and you watch the Howling, some of the effects, of course, some of the effects don't stand up as well as others.
That
But
reminded me of. Did you ever see? I think it was the Kirk Allen Superman serials before George Reeves became Superman. When Kirk Allen would jump into the air to fly away, he would transform into a cartoon character.
oh no, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
and that was in like the 50s, but this is sorry, the 40s. So this is before George Reeves became Superman, where he would like jump off a trampoline, grab a bar, and fly. You know what I mean, or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's how he would land in, and that's how he would land and jump into the air as Superman. Then he was on wires, obviously.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and in the one of the most uncomfortable rigs ever known to mankind on the face of the planet, according to him, or at least according to Ben Affleck in the movie Hollywoodland. Um,
Right.
yeah. So you got the fourth issue coming out. As much as I'm looking forward to it, it's going to suck because it's going to end. So
Yeah.
hopefully we'll get more Howling out of it. But you've also worked in some video games, as you've sent me, and one of the games in particular that you've worked on that I was really interested in mentioning was the original Diablo back in 1996. Not to age you at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Nope. I've been around quite a while. Yeah. I worked at Blizzard Entertainment for 22 years. So yeah, the original Diablo,
You
I
were the
did a
art.
little bit of art,
Yeah.
touch up for that, 3D touching up, 3D images and
Cool.
things for that. Um, and then later on for Diablo 2, I actually got into voice direction,
Oh,
and so
neat.
I got to direct some of the voice actors for Diablo 2, which was a lot of fun.
Did did you design any character in any characters or creatures in Diablo in particular that you can say that I did?
No, I wasn't really doing character design. That was Blizzard North at the time. So Blizzard, there were two kind of primary locations for Blizzard. There was Blizzard South in Irvine. There was Blizzard North. I think they were San Francisco, if I remember right. But yeah, that was, they were kind of doing their own thing. They were focused on Diablo, and then, when they needed some backup for artists to come in and help out, or for the play testing or whatever, all that kind of stuff. When it came closer to time to ship the game, that was when Blizzard South became much more involved. So yeah, for me, for Diablo, it was just a little bit of artistic stuff, and then I ended up doing some stories as well. I did Hatred and Discipline, which was the Demon Hunter story for Diablo 3, and then I also did a novella called Morbid, which was a character that I was hoping was going to become a main character in the franchise. So it still remains to be seen if that's going to be the case or not. But he's a fascinating character. People can find that on Amazon. Morbid, Morbed.
What's the next thing you're going to be working on besides the Howling, if that
Well, I've got
happens?
Yeah, no, I've got all kinds of stuff lined up. I've got like four different contracts that recently came in. I've got one book that's going to be announced at the Frankfurt Book Festival this month. But as far as stuff that I can talk about, I'm working on book 3 in the Turning series. So going back to what I was saying about trying to, be the one man, campaign to bring back werewolves. I've written 2 full length werewolf novels,
Oh, cool.
and one is called The Turning, and that's the first in the series, and that's about a werewolf on a cruise ship. So this guy goes on the cruise ship, and for reasons he doesn't want to turn during the cruise, but he actually does. Circumstances result in him turning, and so you've got a werewolf loose on a cruise ship, and the Coast Guard come in, and they don't know what they're getting into, and they've got shotguns going up against a werewolf, and it just isn't going to end well for the Coast Guard. So you've got The Turning, which is out on Amazon. People can find that. And I did a second book in the series, which is actually a prequel, and I'm working on book 3 right now. So that'll be out hopefully early next year is what I'm shooting for. I'm just about done writing that. And I've also got, I did an Overwatch comic, Torbjorn Destroyer. And so that's going to be part of the Overwatch anthology, which is coming out October 10th. And then for Call of Duty, I wrote the Call of Duty field manual. So that's going to be coming out November 2nd.
I have sitting here in front of me the Howling soundtrack, composed by Pino Donaggio. I'm probably mispronouncing this. Conducted by Natalie Marsara. We'll be playing it tonight, but I thought I'd mention that to you.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It's by La La Land Records, which keeps a very up-to-date, usually in-print stock of soundtracks for films and televisions on their website.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot on Twitter and everything else of these, records making a comeback, and the vinyl and everything else. And some of those are just gorgeous. I would like to get them just for, sometimes for the art and for the nostalgia value.
Yeah, they. I was at Newbury Comics. I don't know if you have any Newbury Comics where you live, but they're a string of what used to be comic book stores, then graduated over to record CD stores, then graduated over to like movies and DVDs, and of course, obviously that has become less lucrative. They become more of a clothing novelty store for like the latest trends of like Marvel, DC, Supernatural, Game of Thrones, The Walking Dead, and now since vinyl has become so huge, their vinyl section has exploded, and they had the Howling soundtrack on vinyl at Newbury Comics.
I need to get a hold of that. There's a few things I need to get a hold of. There's also a statue out there, a really, really well done Howling werewolf statue. People can look that up. I need to get a hold of that thing. I want to get posters. I'd love to get some of the old posters and T-shirts and all that stuff.
And Scream Factory, of course, put out Howling and Howling 2, Your Sister is a Werewolf, on Blu-ray. With bonus material. Lots of bonus material.
I still have the old Howling DVD. And so, some of my horror stuff goes back to VHS. You were talking about dating me earlier. Yeah, that I have the Halloween VHS special that had like 2 VHS tapes in it and a little keychain and
my friend who's a makeup artist, Billy Coyne, and I did a fan commentary for Howling 2, Your Sister is a Werewolf.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. And I actually also tried to reach out to Sybil Shepherd to have her on the show. And she's like, it's not a good time right now, but maybe. And I was like, okay. Is it because I mentioned the Howling?
Is that something you'd rather forget, maybe? Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. So I hate it when these actors are like, oh my God, I can never talk about that. Or that's nothing I can ever ever want to be a part of in any way, shape, or form, including an interview. And it's like, you do realize it's going to follow you around for the rest of your life. And unless you were like something horrible happened to you, like horrible, like anything you could imagine, just whatever, use your imagination, that happened to her, then you gotta live it up because it's gonna be with you forever.
Yeah, it'll stick with you. So then, was that the one that had the machine gun like supposed follow up, or was that
no? My Sister is a Werewolf is the one where Christopher Lee is a priest. It is like the brother of the werewolf queen, the second, because I guess there's an American werewolf queen. There's a European werewolf queen. And she has like the light energy, and then she has like the werewolf orgy.
Okay, right.
Yeah. Okay, so that happens. Yeah, so we did a commentary for Howling 2 because at least the makeup in it was still pretty good. I remember watching it when I was like 7 or 8 years old on Captain USA on the USA Network in the middle of the afternoon on a Saturday, and I didn't know what the fuck I was watching. All I
I
remember
bet
was seeing a lot of weird shit, and obviously the Sybil Shepherd, boob scene was completely cut out, but everything
I was
else
gonna say
was.
you missed out. Yeah,
Yeah, years later, I would be like, "Oh my god, I still love that movie." It gives me like a nostalgia feel when I was like 7 or 8 years old. I didn't know what the hell I was watching. So I'll send you a
that's
link to my commentary. You can sync it up with your movie. So, but
oh, that's awesome.
do you have like a personal website, Twitter, or anything like that people can contact you on, or
Oh yeah,
to
so the
send love for the
spelling for
Howling?
my
Because you
name
definitely want to
is
hear the love because you want to send it to the publisher so they publish another Howling series.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. So my first name is Micky, no E, and then the last name is Neilson. So under that spelling, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter, MickeyNielsen.com. I think that's it. I'm not on Instagram, so yeah, those are the main ones. And I actually did a piece of artwork inspired by the Howling. So I've been putting that up. It's been a work in progress. I've been posting that on Twitter. So if folks want to see that, they can get onto Twitter, and I'll post that every once in a while. I'll eventually put it up on Facebook as well.
Because you're not just a writer, you're also an artist.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. I started at Blizzard doing art, and I did art for 10 years. And I actually, when I started, there was no 3D. It didn't even exist yet. So I was doing 2D art for Blizzard. Moved into 3D, did that for 10 years, and then I moved into writing, and voice direction was kind of lumped in there as well.
Um, uh, Damn it, I had a thought now. I can't even remember what the hell it was. Um, oh, I was gonna now I remember when I and then we'll let you go. When I mentioned the Captain Kronos comic book series based on the Hammer film, they're doing Carolyn Monroe photo covers for every one of the issues as well because she is the love interest of Captain Kronos in the movie, and then she becomes his like partner in the comic book series.
Ooh.
So she's in a scantily clad lingerie on every single one of the covers, which looks fantastic. It's all a lot of photos from Hammer's Glamour collection. I was kind of surprised there were no photo covers for The Howling with maybe some of the beautiful women in it, or at least of the werewolves themselves.
So as far as I know, they have to be careful with likenesses of the actual actors, and that was something. So Jason Johnson is the artist for The Howling, and he did some when he did his character concept sketches, and I mean he did it bang on where his concepts looked exactly like the actors.
Okay.
But as far as I know, and this came from Space Goat, as far as the license goes, it doesn't extend to the likenesses of the actors, and so we actually had to back Jason off a little bit from how dead on his likenesses were. And so you can kind of tell when you're looking at the art in the comic, it looks pretty close sometimes to the actual actors, but it's not 100%. And so I think it'd be the same for the photos. They'd probably that must be a whole different set of licenses or permissions for them to do that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Obviously, Titan is publishing Captain Kronos, and they are in the UK, so that probably helps their relationship with Hammer, and whoever owns the Hammer licensing, whatever it happens to be. But Titan publishes all the Hammer-related stuff, as well as a lot of other UK books like Doctor Who. So that probably is a reason, it being in-house and UK being a little bit of a smaller country with its collection of cinema and a little easier to deal with than the United States, maybe.
Yeah, and it might be different. I think all these people who own all these different licenses, I think it's a little bit of a mixture sometimes. It's not always the same as far as what they own. I think some of them do own everything, including the actors' likenesses and everything else. But yeah, for the Howling, it's that's not the case.
again, thank you so much for coming on the show with us, Mickey.
Well, it's been a blast. Thanks for having me, and I'd love to come back anytime.
Absolutely. We'll look forward to what else you're doing coming up, and hopefully we will see another, announcement in another Howling comic book series from Space Goat.
Yep, keep your eyes and ears peeled, and we'll see what happens. Once the trade paperback is out and everything. I believe that's coming out in December, so keep an eye out for that as well. And I'm hoping for good things.
Cool. Thank you so much again, Mickey.
Thank you, Chris. It's been a pleasure.
Yep.